The alarms on Dock 7 screamed so loud that my teeth hurt, and I dropped the crate I was carrying right on my foot. I did not have time to feel the pain. Every human worker on the station was already running, because the announcement over the speakers said a ship had entered restricted space without clearance, and the station defense grid was arming itself to fire. My name is Callum Brandt, and 3 minutes earlier my biggest problem was a jammed cargo lift. Now I was standing in a hallway full of panicking dock workers, watching a small emergency shuttle spin wildly through the loading bay doors before crashing into a stack of empty containers. Smoke poured out of the shuttle. Nobody moved to help, because half the station staff were species who did not know if the wreck was dangerous, and the other half were too afraid of the defense turrets swinging toward the crash site. I ran anyway. I do not know why. My foot was throbbing and my ears were ringing, but I ran straight into the smoke, coughing, until I found the hatch of the shuttle hanging open on one hinge. Inside, curled against a chair that had folded in on itself, was a girl. She looked young, maybe the equivalent of a teenager if I had to guess a human age, though I had no idea what species she belonged to. Her skin had a faint gray-blue shine under the emergency lights. Her eyes were too large for a human face, and her clothes were plain gray traveling robes with no markings on them at all. She was shaking, and there was a thin cut above her eyebrow. Hey, look at me," I said, pulling her free of the wreckage before the turrets outside finished locking onto the shuttle. "We need to move, now." She stared at me like she did not understand human speech, but she let me pull her out through the broken hatch anyway. We ran together through the loading bay, past confused station guards who were still trying to figure out whose jurisdiction the crash fell under, and I did not stop until we were 3 corridors away, in the back hallway behind the noodle stall where I usually ate lunch. The station's grid never fired. Somebody up in traffic control must have finally confirmed the shuttle was not a threat, because the alarms cut off, and the corridor went quiet except for our breathing. I let go of her arm and finally looked at her properly. "You all right?" I asked. That was not a landing. That was barely a controlled fall. She did not answer right away. She was looking at her own hands like she had never seen them shake before. "I am uninjured," she finally said, in a voice that was steady even though her hands were not. Her accent was strange, careful, like she had learned the common trade language from books instead of people. "You should not have come for me. It was not required." "Didn't look like anyone else was going to," I said. "You hungry? You look like you haven't eaten in a while." That seemed to surprise her more than the crash had. "I have not eaten since yesterday," she admitted. "I had half a sandwich left in my jacket pocket from my lunch break, wrapped in cloth the way my mother used to do it. It was nothing special, some kind of pressed protein and greens between 2 slices of station-issue bread." I held it out to her. "Here. It's not much, but it'll hold you until you figure out where you're supposed to be." She looked at the sandwich, like I had handed her something made of solid gold. "You are simply giving this to me," she said slowly, without condition. "It's a sandwich, not a peace treaty," I said, laughing a little. "Eat it before I change my mind and eat it myself." She took it with both hands, careful, like it might break, and ate slowly, while I sat down against the wall to catch my breath and check the cut over her eyebrow. It was not deep. It would heal on its own. "What's your name?" I asked. "Vessi," she said, after a small pause, like she was deciding how much of an answer to give. "I'm Callum. You want to tell me why a shuttle with no markings just crashed into Dock 7? Or is that a conversation for people with higher clearance than me?" She almost smiled at that. "It is a long story," she said. "I would rather not tell it standing in a hallway that smells of fried noodles." I laughed, actually laughed, in the middle of what had just been the most stressful 10 minutes of my week. "Fair enough. Come on, let's get that cut cleaned up properly, and get you somewhere that isn't about to have security crawling all over it." We ended up at my quarters, which were small and cluttered with tools and half-finished repair projects, because I fixed cargo drones on the side to make extra credits. Vessi sat on the edge of my cot while I found the medical kit and cleaned the cut on her forehead. She flinched once, but did not complain. "You are not afraid of me," she observed, watching me work. "Should I be?" I asked. "You're a kid who just survived a crash. Doesn't exactly scream danger." "You do not know what I am," she said quietly. "No," I admitted, But you're bleeding and hungry and about my height, and none of those things are scary. Ask me again when you grow a second head or something." That got an actual laugh out of her, short and surprised, like it had escaped before she could stop it. We talked for a while after that. She asked strange questions, the kind that made me pause before answering, like why I had run toward the crash instead of away from it, why I had given her food when I did not know if she could even eat human food safely, why I had not asked for anything in return. "Because that's just what you do," I told her. "Someone's in trouble, you help. Someone's hungry, you feed them if you can. It's not complicated." "Where I come from," she said, looking at her hands again, "very little is given without expectation of return. Everything is a transaction. Every kindness has a price attached, even if the price is only owed later." "Sounds exhausting," I said honestly. "It is," she agreed, and there was something heavy in the way she said it, something that made her look older than she had a moment before. I did not push her on it. I figured if she wanted to tell me more, she would, and if she didn't, that was fine too. We ended up talking about nothing important for almost an hour. Station gossip, the terrible food at the noodle stall, the way the artificial sunlight cycle on this particular station always felt about 20 minutes too short. She asked what a joke was, and I told her 3 bad ones, and she laughed at all of them, badly, like she was still learning how laughing worked. It was, honestly, one of the more relaxed hours I had spent in months. Then someone started pounding on my door. I opened it to find 2 figures in tall formal coats standing in the corridor, both easily 7 feet tall, with skin the same gray-blue shade as Vessie's, and expressions that made my stomach drop before either of them said a word. "We have tracked an emergency locator beacon to this location," the taller one said, voice clipped and urgent. "Where is she?" Vessie stood up behind me before I could answer. "I am here," she said, and her voice had changed completely. "Gone," was the careful, curious tone from a moment ago. This voice was steady, commanding, the kind of voice that expected to be obeyed without question. Both figures dropped to one knee immediately, right there in my cramped little corridor, heads bowed. "Your Eminence," the taller one said, "we feared the worst. The shuttle malfunction, the crash, we lost the signal for 11 minutes, we—" "I am uninjured," Vessie said, cutting them off gently but firmly, "thanks to this man." Both figures turned to look at me, and I suddenly became very aware that I was standing in my own doorway in a stained work shirt, having just spent the last hour telling bad jokes to someone they were calling Your Eminence. "Okay," I said slowly. "I feel like I'm missing some very important context here." Vessie turned to me, and for the first time since I had pulled her out of that wreck, she looked genuinely uncertain. "My full title is Vessie, Sovereign Regent of the Combined Systems," she said. "I govern, in some capacity, nearly 400 inhabited worlds across this region of the galaxy." I stood there for a long moment, processing that sentence the way you process someone telling you your house is on fire, a half-second of pure blankness before the meaning actually lands. "You're telling me," I said carefully, "that I gave half a sandwich to the ruler of 400 planets." "Yes," she said, and I told her 3 terrible jokes. "They were terrible," she agreed, and there was the ghost of a smile there, even now, even with 2 of her own guards kneeling in my hallway. "I'm going to need to sit down," I said, and I did, right there on the floor, because my legs had apparently decided they were done being useful. The guards wanted to escort her away immediately, back to whatever secure transport was waiting, but Vessie held up a hand and they stopped, still kneeling, not questioning her for a second. "Explain the crash," she said to them. "Now, here." The taller guard straightened slightly. "Your Eminence, you left your personal fleet without informing your full security detail. You took an unregistered courier shuttle to observe conditions on this station personally, against the explicit recommendation of your council. The shuttle's navigation system failed during approach due to outdated software, a fault that should have been caught in inspection. So this was not an attack," Vessie said. "No, Your Eminence. A mechanical failure, nothing more." I finally found my voice again. "Wait, you snuck away from your own guards? On purpose?" Vessie looked at me, and something in her expression shifted, something tired and honest. My counsel tells me what conditions are like on stations like this one through reports, she said. Numbers, statistics, approved summaries written by people who have never set foot outside a palace. I wanted to see it myself, just once, to sit somewhere ordinary, unannounced, and see how people actually treat a stranger who has nothing to offer them. And? I asked. And I crashed a shuttle into a cargo bay, she said, and a mechanic ran through smoke to pull me out, then gave me his lunch, and told me terrible jokes for an hour, expecting nothing back. The guards exchanged a look that I could not quite read, somewhere between shock and something close to reverence. Your Eminence, the shorter guard said carefully, the council will need to be informed immediately. There will be questions about security protocol, about the failure of the shuttle systems, about... I am aware, Vesey said, and her tone made it clear the conversation about protocol failures was not going to be pleasant for whoever was responsible. But first, I want a moment. The guards hesitated, then stepped back into the corridor, giving us space, though I noticed they did not go far. Vesey turned back to me. Callum, I need you to understand something. Where I come from, no one gives without calculating what they might gain. Advisors flatter me because my favor brings them power. Delegates from other systems offer gifts because they want trade concessions. Even kindness, when it is offered to me, usually has a shape to it, a hope attached, something owed in return. That sounds lonely, I said, before I could stop myself. It is, she said simply. You did not know who I was. You saw someone hurt and hungry, and you helped. And then you fed me, and then you made jokes with me, and none of it had a shape. None of it was owed. I have not experienced that in longer than I can properly remember. I did not know what to say to that, so I said the only honest thing I had. I'd have done the same for anyone. You didn't need to be important for me to help you. You just needed to be in trouble. I know, she said. That is exactly why it mattered. There was a silence after that, not an uncomfortable one, just a pause while both of us let the last few minutes settle into something we could actually understand. So what happens now? I asked. Do I get arrested for treating royalty like a stray cat? Or is there a form I need to sign? That earned a real laugh from her, the same short, surprised one from earlier. Except this time, she did not seem embarrassed by it. Now, she said, my security detail escorts me back to my fleet. Protocol is reviewed. Several engineers responsible for the shuttle's navigation software have a very uncomfortable meeting ahead of them, and I return to a schedule I did not want to leave in the first place. Sounds rough, I said. It is my duty, she said, and there was no complaint in it, just fact. She stood, smoothing down the plain gray robes that I now realized were probably some kind of deliberate disguise, and looked at me for a long moment. I would like to offer you something, she said, for your assistance. It is customary. You don't have to, I said quickly. I already told you, I wasn't doing it for a reward. I know, she said. That is precisely why I am offering. A gift given without the expectation of one in return deserves to be met the same way, not repaid as a transaction, but honored as a gesture. Is there anything you want, Callum? Anything at all? I thought about it, actually thought about it, and realized I did not want credits, or a better apartment, or a promotion I had not earned through actual work. There's a repair contract renewal coming up for the station's cargo drone fleet, I said slowly. Half the drones out here are held together with patched wiring and hope. If somebody with actual authority looked into getting this station proper maintenance funding, that would help a lot of people who work here every single day. Not just me. Vesey studied me for a moment, and something in her expression softened even further. You could have asked for wealth, she said. Status. A place among my court even. And instead, you ask for maintenance funding for a cargo station most of the galaxy has never heard of. I like fixing things, I said with a shrug. And I like the people here. Might as well ask for something that actually helps them. It will be done, she said, and I believed her completely. The way you believe someone who has clearly never had to lie to get what they want. The station will receive full maintenance funding, effective immediately, along with an inspection team to ensure the drones and shuttle systems are brought up to proper standard. No mechanical failure should happen again on this station, to anyone. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. She walked to the door, then paused, looking back at me one more time. "Callum," she said, "I do not know when I will return to this station, or if I will. My duties rarely allow for return visits to any single location. But I want you to know that this hour, sitting in your quarters, being handed a sandwich by a stranger who had no idea who I was, is the most genuine hour I have experienced in longer than I can remember. I will not forget it, and I do not think my counsel will forget the report I intend to file about it either." "What report?" I asked. "A recommendation," she said, "that any future assessments of a species be less concerned with military capability or resource output, and more concerned with how they treat a stranger in need, when nothing is expected in return. I have read countless reports on countless worlds. None of them mentioned this. Perhaps they should have." She left after that, flanked by her guards, the corridor emptying out as quickly as it had filled, and I stood in my doorway for a long time afterward, holding an empty cloth that used to have a sandwich wrapped inside it. 3 weeks later, the maintenance funding arrived, exactly as promised, along with an inspection team that fixed problems on this station that had been ignored for years. The cargo drones stopped breaking down every other week. The lift that had jammed on the day of the crash got replaced entirely. Nobody on the station knew why the funding had suddenly appeared, except for me, and I did not tell anyone the real reason, because some things are not mine to explain. I still work the same job, fixing drones, hauling crates, eating bad noodles on my lunch break. Nothing about my life looks particularly different from the outside. But every so often, when I unwrap my lunch and see there is more than I need, I think about a girl who crashed a shuttle into my dock, who ate half a sandwich like it was the finest meal she had ever tasted, and who told me that the simplest thing I had ever done was the rarest thing she had ever received. I do not know if I will ever see Vessi again. Statistically, across 400 worlds and a schedule that never seems to slow down, the odds are not in my favor. But I like to think that somewhere out there, in some formal meeting room, surrounded by advisors who calculate every gesture down to the smallest detail, there is a woman who governs more of the galaxy than I will ever be able to picture, who occasionally remembers a hallway that smelled like fried noodles, and a stranger who gave her food simply because she looked hungry. That is all it ever was, really. Someone was in trouble. I helped. Someone was hungry. I fed her. It was never complicated, and it never needed to be. I just did not expect it to matter quite so much.